The episode began like any other morning broadcast, with upbeat music and friendly banter setting a relaxed tone. Snoop Dogg appeared calm as he joined the hosts of Today with Jenna Friends, exchanging jokes and smiles. Viewers at home expected a light-hearted conversation about music, legacy, and upcoming projects. Yet beneath the surface, there was a subtle tension that only became noticeable as the discussion slowly shifted away from safe topics. Jenna welcomed Snoop warmly, praising his decades-long influence on music and pop culture. Snoop responded with his trademark humor, drawing laughter from the audience. As the conversation progressed, however, questions began to explore deeper themes, touching on public image, responsibility, and how long-running artists adapt to changing cultural expectations. While still respectful, the tone grew more serious. Snoop listened closely as one of the hosts referenced recent debates surrounding artists and social influence. He nodded at first, offering measured responses about staying true to oneself. His voice remained steady, but viewers later noted his body language becoming more reserved. What started as thoughtful dialogue began to feel like a subtle challenge to his long-held philosophy. That discussion moved toward the balance between entertainment and accountability. Jenna framed her question carefully, emphasizing curiosity rather than criticism. Snoop replied by stressing authenticity and creative freedom, explaining that his career was built on honesty, not conformity. The exchange remained calm, yet the difference in viewpoints became increasingly clear. As the segment continued, Snoop's answers grew more reflective. He spoke about navigating decades in the spotlight and the pressure to constantly redefine oneself. The hosts acknowledged his experience but gently pushed the conversation toward how public figures are perceived today. This shift, though nuanced, appeared to strike a nerve. Audience members noticed a brief pause before Snoop responded, as if weighing his words. He explained that public perception often overlooks personal growth, focusing instead on past images. While the hosts expressed understanding, the conversation's direction felt heavier than expected for a morning show, altering the energy in the studio. The exchange turned toward media narratives and how artists are framed in interviews. Snoop remarked that conversations can sometimes feel more like judgments than discussions. Jenna reassured him that the intent was dialogue, not critique. Despite the reassurance, the emotional distance between guest and host seemed to widen. Snoop leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms briefly before continuing. He spoke about feeling boxed into labels that no longer represented him fully. The hosts listened attentively, but their follow-up questions maintained the same thematic direction, keeping the pressure steady rather than easing it. Viewers later described the atmosphere as tense but controlled. No voices were raised, and no harsh words were exchanged. Still, the emotional undercurrent was unmistakable. Snoop's trademark ease was replaced by a guarded tone, signaling discomfort with where the conversation had landed. As the segment neared its midpoint, Jenna attempted to lighten the mood by referencing Snoop's recent creative adventures. For a moment, the tension eased, and Snoop smiled again. However, the relief was brief, as the discussion soon circled back to broader cultural expectations and scrutiny. Snoop clarified that he respected open conversation but valued boundaries. He emphasized that not every platform allows space for nuance. The hosts acknowledged this point, yet continued exploring similar themes, perhaps unaware of how close the exchange was to Snoop's personal limits. A noticeable silence followed one particular question, stretching longer than typical live television pauses. Snoop looked down briefly before responding, his tone calm but firm. He stated that he felt misunderstood in moments like these, despite his willingness to engage honestly. Jenna expressed appreciation for his openness, noting that such discussions are rarely simple. Still, the conversation's emotional weight continued to build. Snoop's responses became shorter, more deliberate, suggesting that patience was wearing thin. The audience sensed a turning point as Snoop shifted forward in his seat. He reiterated that dialogue should feel mutual, not one-sided. The hosts agreed in principle, but the disconnect in perspective remained unresolved, creating a subtle but powerful friction. Snoop then stated that while he respected the show, he was feeling uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. His words were calm, lacking anger, but carried clear resolve. The studio grew quiet as viewers realized something unexpected was unfolding. Jenna responded with concern, offering to redirect or pause. Before she could finish, Snoop stood up slowly, thanking the hosts for the invitation. His movement caught everyone off guard, transforming a thoughtful discussion into a moment of live television unpredictability. As Snoop addressed the audience, he explained that sometimes stepping away is better than forcing a conversation. His tone remained respectful, emphasizing self-awareness rather than conflict. The hosts appeared surprised but maintained professionalism, wishing him well. Snoop walked off the set calmly, without dramatic gestures. The cameras captured the moment in silence, highlighting the gravity of the decision. Jenna remained seated, visibly processing what had just occurred, while the atmosphere in the studio felt markedly subdued. After the break, Jenna addressed viewers directly, acknowledging the unexpected turn. She emphasized respect for personal boundaries and thanked Snoop for his time. Her response aimed to restore calm while honoring the authenticity of the moment. Social media reactions followed almost immediately, with clips circulating widely. Some praised Snoop for prioritizing comfort and boundaries, while others debated whether the moment was misunderstood. The incident quickly became a trending topic across entertainment platforms. Commentators analyzed the exchange, pointing out how subtle shifts in tone and framing can escalate tension. Many noted that the walk-off lacked hostility, distinguishing it from more explosive on-air confrontations. This nuance shaped how the moment was ultimately perceived. Fans of Snoop highlighted his long history of openness and devolution, viewing the decision as consistent with his emphasis on self-respect. They argued that walking away can be a powerful statement, especially in environments where expectations feel misaligned. Supporters of the show emphasized the challenge of navigating complex conversations live. They praised the hosts for maintaining composure and empathy, framing the moment as an example of human unpredictability rather than failure. Media analysts suggested the incident reflected broader cultural shifts toward valuing mental and emotional well-being. What once might have been labeled unprofessional was increasingly seen as self-aware. The walk-off became part of a larger conversation about boundaries in public discourse. In later appearances elsewhere, Snoop spoke generally about knowing when to disengage, without referencing specifics. His comments focused on peace and intention, reinforcing the idea that the decision was thoughtful rather than impulsive. The show continued its regular programming in subsequent episodes, but viewers remained attentive to emotional cues. The incident subtly changed audience expectations, reminding them that live television carries real emotional stakes. Over time, the initial shock gave way to reflection. Discussions shifted from assigning blame to examining how conversations are structured. The moment encouraged greater awareness of how easily discomfort can arise, even in friendly settings. Entertainment insiders noted that such moments often lead to quiet changes behind the scenes. While no formal statements were made, the industry took note of how authenticity and care must coexist to sustain meaningful dialogue. As the story settled into pop culture memory, it was remembered less for drama and more for its restraint. The absence of anger or accusation gave the walk-off a different weight, emphasizing dignity over a spectacle. In the end, the moment stood as a reminder that even icons have limits. Snoop Dogg's decision to leave the stage highlighted the human side of public figures, showing that choosing self-respect can sometimes speak louder than any on-air explanation. In the days that followed, media outlets revisited the episode with slower, more deliberate analysis. Commentators pointed out that the absence of raised voices made the moment more striking, not less. It challenged the usual expectations of the televised conflict, proving that discomfort can exist quietly and still carry weight. The walk-off became notable precisely because it resisted spectacle. Viewers who rewatched the segment noticed how gradually the tension developed. Nothing dramatic marked the beginning. Instead, it was the accumulation of subtle pressure that shaped the outcome. This realization sparked conversations about how easily boundaries can be crossed without obvious intent, especially when discussions drift into deeply personal territory. Snoop's long career was frequently referenced in these reflections, with many noting how rarely he reacts impulsively in public settings. This context led audiences to interpret the walk-off as a deliberate choice rather than an emotional outburst. The moment was reframed as measured and intentional, grounded in self-awareness rather than frustration. Fans shared personal stories online, describing times when they wished they had stepped away from uncomfortable conversations but felt obligated to stay. For them, the incident resonated beyond celebrity culture, touching on universal experiences of pressure and restraint. Snoop's quiet exit became symbolic of choosing self-respect over compliance. Media psychologists weighed in, explaining how live interviews can unintentionally corner guests into defending identities they've already outgrown. When that happens, even well-meaning questions can feel intrusive. That discussion emphasized the importance of flexibility in conversation, allowing space to pivot when emotional strain becomes apparent. Jenna and her co-hosts were widely praised for their response after the walk-off. Rather than rushing to explain or justify, they acknowledged the moment and moved forward with grace. Their restraint reinforced the idea that not every situation requires immediate resolution, especially when emotions are involved. Industry insiders noted that such moments often influence future booking decisions, not through avoidance but through clarity. Artists became more open about setting conversational boundaries in advance. The incident subtly encouraged a culture where expectations are discussed rather than assumed. Snoop's later public appearances reflected a renewed emphasis on intention. He spoke warmly, joked freely, but remained selective about topics he engaged deeply with. This balance reinforced the notion that growth doesn't require full emotional exposure in every setting. The story also prompted discussions about audience expectations. Viewers questioned whether constant access to celebrities has blurred the line between curiosity and entitlement. The walk-off served as a reminder that public figures are participants in conversations, not obligations to them. Over time, the clip lost its viral urgency but gained reflective value. It was referenced in podcasts, panels, and essays about communication. The moment endured not because of outrage, but because of the calm dignity with which it unfolded. Younger artists cited the incident as reassuring, noting that it modeled how to disengage without hostility. In an industry that often rewards endurance over honesty, the walk-off suggested an alternative path rooted in awareness and choice. The conversation around the episode expanded into broader workplace culture discussions. Commentators drew parallels between live television and everyday professional environments, where people often feel pressured to remain in uncomfortable exchanges to appear cooperative. As narratives matured, blame faded almost entirely. The moment was no longer framed as a clash, but as a mismatch of pacing and emotional readiness. This reframing allowed space for empathy on all sides, reducing polarization. In retrospectives, the incident was often described as quietly influential. It didn't change formats overnight, but it nudged conversations toward greater care. Its impact lay in what it suggested rather than what it declared. Ultimately, the extended legacy of Snoop Dogg walking off the show rested in its humanity. It reminded audiences that boundaries don't require confrontation to be valid. Sometimes, the most powerful statement is simply knowing when to step away and doing so with respect. As discussions continued across media platforms, the incident was increasingly framed as a moment of cultural transition rather than controversy. Commentators suggested that audiences are learning to recognize emotional cues in real time, understanding that silence, pauses, and restraint can communicate as much as words. Snoop's exit, calm and deliberate, became an example of how agency can be exercised without confrontation, reinforcing evolving norms around emotional intelligence. The replaying of the clip in slower formats revealed how carefully Snoop chose his language before standing up. Each sentence appeared intentional, as if he were closing a chapter rather than reacting impulsively. This observation strengthened the view that the walk-off was less about disagreement and more about alignment, signaling when a conversation no longer serves its intended purpose. Fans began comparing the moment to earlier eras of television, noting how different the response might have been years ago. Where once such an exit could have been framed as disrespect, it was now often interpreted as self-awareness. This shift reflected broader changes in how society views emotional labor and the right to disengage. The host's measured handling of the aftermath continued to earn praise, especially for resisting the urge to over-explain. By acknowledging the moment and moving forward, they allowed space for viewers to process without steering reactions. This approach subtly modeled how to respond when plans change unexpectedly due to human emotion. Cultural critics pointed out that the absence of a dramatic resolution made the moment linger longer in public memory. Without a clear winner or apology, the incident invited reflection rather than closure. This ambiguity encouraged ongoing dialogue about how conversations unfold under pressure and who gets to decide when they end. Snoop's artistry was also revisited through this lens, with listeners finding new resonance in his lyrics about peace, balance, and perspective. The walk-off seemed consistent with themes he has explored over time, reinforcing authenticity rather than contradicting it. For many, it deepened appreciation rather than diminishing admiration. In professional circles, the moment was cited during training sessions focused on communication and consent. The idea that participation can be withdrawn respectfully became a central takeaway. Snoop's example illustrated that setting limits doesn't invalidate the conversation that came before it. Viewers who initially felt unsettled by the interruption later described feeling grateful for the honesty of the moment. Live television rarely pauses for emotional reality, and when it does, it can feel jarring. Over time, that jolt was reframed as a reminder that authenticity isn't always comfortable, but it is necessary. The incident also prompted reflection on pacing in interviews. Analysts suggested that slowing down, checking in, and allowing for topic shifts could prevent emotional overload. While not every interview can anticipate such needs, awareness itself was seen as progress influenced by moments like this. As months passed, the walk-off became a reference point rather than a headline. It surfaced in conversations about leadership, creativity, and boundaries, far removed from its original context. Its endurance lay in adaptability, fitting into discussions well beyond entertainment. Snoop's public image remained largely unchanged, yet subtly enriched. The decision to leave was viewed as consistent with maturity earned through experience. Rather than diminishing authority, it reinforced credibility grounded in self-knowledge. The show's audience similarly evolved, expressing appreciation for moments that feel real rather than rehearsed. Viewers acknowledged that unpredictability, when handled with care, can strengthen trust. The incident underscored that authenticity sometimes requires allowing things to end unfinished. Over time, fewer people asked what went wrong and more asked what was learned. This shift marked the true impact of the moment, transforming curiosity into contemplation. The walk-off became less about interruption and more about intention. In broader cultural memory, the episode stood as a quiet marker of change. It reflected a growing acceptance that emotional boundaries are valid, even in public. Even live. The absence of drama became its defining strength. Ultimately, the extended story settled into something reflective rather than reactive. Snoop Dogg's calm departure and the host's respectful response combined to create a moment that resonated long after airtime. It reminded audiences that dignity, when chosen consciously, can leave the most lasting impression. In the months following the episode, entertainment podcasts dissected the walk-off, analyzing each moment in slow motion. Commentators highlighted subtle cues in Snoop Dogg's body language, the way he leaned back, the calm pacing of his words, and the deliberate nature of his exit. Fans praised the clarity of his choice, noting that it demonstrated emotional intelligence rarely seen in high-pressure live broadcasts. Social media continued to circulate clips, memes, and fan reactions, but the narrative shifted from shock to admiration. Many viewers used the moment as a teaching example, illustrating how to disengage from situations that compromise personal comfort or integrity. Snoop's actions were lauded for modeling self-respect over performative compliance. Television producers began reflecting on interview strategies after observing the long-lasting impact of the moment. Insights included allowing guests to steer conversation boundaries, creating checkpoints for emotional intensity, and building in flexibility for unexpected shifts. The incident subtly influenced how future celebrity appearances were structured. Cultural analysts noted that the walk-off aligned with a broader societal trend valuing mental health, self-care, and autonomy. Where once walking away might have been criticized, it was now often celebrated as self-awareness. The audience response reflected evolving attitudes toward the emotional demands placed on public figures. Snoop Dogg's team released subtle statements afterward, thanking the hosts and emphasizing that his exit was not personal. This approach helped frame the moment as intentional rather than reactive. By controlling the narrative subtly without sensationalizing it, they reinforced the message that personal boundaries matter above all else. Fans drew parallels to Snoop's lyrics and public persona, interpreting the incident as consistent with his long-standing themes of calm, wisdom, and self-assurance. Many saw the walk-off as another layer of authenticity, reinforcing that his on-air decisions are guided by principle rather than impulse. Jenna and her co-hosts reflected on the episode privately, noting that flexibility and empathy are crucial in live conversations. While they initially felt surprised, they recognized the value of honoring a guest's choice to step back. Their perspective became part of media training discussions about emotional literacy in live broadcasting. Analysts also discussed audience psychology, explaining how the discomfort of watching a celebrity exit can evoke introspection. Many viewers projected their own experiences of setting boundaries onto the situation, creating a more personal and meaningful connection to the moment. The walk-off became a case study in communication workshops, emphasizing the importance of clear consent and exit strategies in dialogue. Snoop's measured approach was highlighted as a model for navigating emotionally charged conversations without conflict, demonstrating respect for self and others simultaneously. Over time, the incident was cited in motivational and leadership contexts. Experts highlighted that choosing when to disengage is not a weakness but a form of strategic self-management. Snoop's decision illustrated how calm, intentional action can prevent unnecessary escalation while maintaining dignity. Discussions among fans and cultural commentators increasingly emphasized intention rather than spectacle. Instead of framing the walk-off as a scandal, they focused on the thoughtful reasoning behind it. This reframing helped shift the narrative toward reflection and learning. The clip continued to circulate during retrospectives of memorable live television moments. Unlike explosive confrontations, this instance stood out for its subtlety and composure. Snoop Dogg's quiet authority in managing the situation became a defining aspect of the story. Comparisons emerged with other celebrity interactions, noting that rare moments of deliberate disengagement often leave longer-lasting impressions than dramatic outbursts. Snoop's calm departure contrasted sharply with expectations of conflict, demonstrating restraint as a form of influence. Over time, public discussion shifted from judgment to admiration. Fans praised Snoop for prioritizing emotional health over performance, framing the walk-off as a relatable and empowering moment. It inspired conversations about agency, self-care, and emotional intelligence across demographics. Ultimately, the incident solidified its place as a teachable moment in media culture. Snoop Dogg walking off today with Jenna Friends was remembered not for controversy, but for demonstrating calm, deliberate action in response to personal limits. The event underscored that sometimes stepping away, done with intention, is more impactful than any dialogue could ever be.